welcome back. Today I am joined by Dr. James Chen, who is here on behalf of MemorialCare. Well, Dr. Chen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Lisa. Very nice to meet you.
Now, I understand that you are very new to MemorialCare, so we would certainly like to hear about how your journey brought you to the area. So give us a little background on yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the introduction. So I'm Dr. James Chen. As you mentioned, I'm new to the area, just this last month, actually. So I specialize in hip and knee replacements, and I focus my care to the patient by customizing with the use of technology and rapid recovery protocols. And so this is really, I've always seen as a gem of Southern California. So I'm very happy to be back in the area.
So where were you before?
So I did most of my training up in Los Angeles and New York City, actually. And so I am coming fresh from New York. So quite a change in pace, but me and my family, we're loving the area.
That's great. Yes. And I'm sure you'll be loving the weather soon, if not already.
Yes.
So obviously, Southern Californians are very active outside and they play a lot of sports. Even into their elderly years. I mean, with our community, they are super active. Tennis, pickleball, golf. I mean, you name it, they are out there and they're very active. So of course, our knees hurt, our hips hurt. There's all sorts of things that hurt all the time. So I'm sure you see your fair share of those folks who come to you. So, or come to, the area in terms of needing something done. So give me an idea of why we would replace something as opposed to just kind of nurturing it.
Definitely. And that's a great question, Lisa. And, that's one of the beauties of this area is that we can all enjoy the outdoors, we can stay active. And so when you should consider sort of a hip and knee replacement surgery or come see me is when you can't do those things anymore. And so I think, I'm an active individual. I like to keep my patients active as well. So if you can't do those activities you want to do, like pickleball, tennis, golf, sporting activities, and you are starting to have pain in your hips, your knees, things like anti-inflammatories, therapy, ice are no longer working, then just come in, take a visit. And that's when you should really start considering these replacement surgeries to help you become active again.
So I know that technology has changed quite a bit, over time and obviously for the better. But I still think, in my opinion, that people are still worried about hip replacements or even back surgery or a knee replacement or something, because they're always worried, gosh, what if it doesn't work? And then I'm like, are you worse off than you were before? What would you say to those people?
Definitely, very, very valid concerns. We've come a long way in the past several decades, especially as far as making this a safe and very streamlined procedure. And if you have those concerns, I'd recommend you to come in and talk to us, because we like to sort of exhaust non-operative management first, get you the most out of it. But when it comes to the point of having a back surgery or hip replacement surgery or knee replacement surgery, you'll know typically, and it's generally worth the risk, and it's a very safe and streamlined procedure these days. We do the surgery and you're up walking the same day majority of the time. Same day discharges are now becoming a new thing, which we can discuss later. So it's, I think, changed quite a bit.
Yeah. So let's talk about those procedures. What are some things that you do now that you didn't have maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, correct. So there's a lot of exciting things, and I could talk for hours on these different technologies that are coming out. But I think as a whole, the new sort of approach, or the approach these days, is really a team-based approach. And I think it's important to know that when we go through this as a patient, you are a part of that team. I'm a part of that team. Your anesthesiologist, your social help at home, whether it be your spouse, family member, a friend, the nursing staff, the hospital staff. It's really a team-based approach. And that sort of those protocols that are in place, that again, we can go through in detail at some other time, are really the big changes that I see. There are other changes, of course, technology, so certain instruments that help me put the positions in an exact position that I like to sort of put them in, and adjust them and customize them to specific patients. So there are different technologies such as robotics, navigation, that help us sort of do that and execute the surgery in a more minimally invasive approach and a customized approach as well.
I hear a lot about robotic surgery, and I'm just curious because the question was actually posed to me like, well, what is the advantage of using a robotic situation as opposed to just your hands and actually doing the surgery on the patient as opposed to the robotics?
Correct. That's a great question. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding when it comes to robotics and total joints as well. There's a lot of robotic innovation that's happening in surgery in general. When it comes to total hip and total knee replacement surgeries, the hands-on portion of it is still in the surgeon's hands. It's really a navigation type tool that uses a robotic assistance to actually perform that surgery. So when putting in the components, when preparing the bone, it's an assistive device, but the surgery is always in the surgeon's hands.
So what does it assist you with?
I think the big thing is preoperative planning. So with some of the robots out there, before we do any cuts, before we even get to the operating room, we can plan the size of implants, the position based off your pelvic anatomy, your spine anatomy, helps us go into the surgery with an ideal target in a safe zone for that individual patient, and then helps guarantee the execution of that. And again, as surgeons, we're trained to do this very well. And total hips is one of the most successful procedures in history of medicine. And so clearly it's a very well-performing surgery. This just allows us to push the procedure a little bit further down that mark.
Okay, so if somebody was a candidate for a hip replacement or even a knee replacement, I imagine they would have to have x-rays or MRIs. And at that time is when you would use your robotic assistance as to how to identify what you would use. And then that person would come in for surgery?
Correct. There are many different types. And so it does depend, but there are some based off anatomy. We always check x-rays on all of our patients before the surgery. Some we have to get advanced imaging, which then we sort of use the robotic planning and navigation to then make those specific plans, as you mentioned. Correct.
Okay. All right, great. Now, of course, we're just coming out of our pandemic for the most part, and people are still concerned about coming back to having surgery. Is that something that you can advise them to do today?
Yeah, definitely. And, I was just having this conversation earlier today, there's been a lot of changes in the medical field when it comes to the pandemic, obviously. And when it comes to an elective surgery like total hip and knee replacements, there's been a lot of that question. Is it a good time to go to the hospital? And argue that depending on where you are, it's almost safer. And that's because of all of the things that we've done at the hospital. So when you come to the hospital, everybody that you encounter that works there has either been vaccinated or tested negative. Patients that now come to the hospital have to prove themselves testing negative. And so the process as far as getting patients in the door, there's at least some verification there. There's also been a big push with getting patients home safely, and that's where that team approach that I previously mentioned sort of comes into play. And then we're also offering more education. So our preoperative classes for total hip and knees are all done virtually now as well. And so that's been a good resource for the majority of our patients. So I think now is actually a very good and safe time to have these elective surgeries done.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you sharing that information with us, and welcome to the area.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
All right, you're welcome. And we'll be right back after this.